February 20th, 2026. We are in the fourth year day, 362, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Welcome. I greet you. Checklist. Identify key points. Remove repetition. Shorten phrases. Preserve meaning. Keep perspective. Today's situation report covers changes on the front lines and Russian statements about the Ukrainian offensive in Zaporizhzhia. Because it is slowly gaining some momentum, or rather, the fog of war seems to be lifting a bit. Because we have new geolocations, we will also look at further territorial changes in the Wobchansk area, as well as the loss of a Russian aircraft, and much more. The report, as always, is packed with a lot of information, so feel free to subscribe for free so you don't miss anything in the future. But before we get started, the first 5 vehicles from our last donation campaign have now arrived in Ukraine. These are evacuation vehicles or wounded transport vehicles that we financed together with Ukraine Berlin. On average, each one saves 100 lives. Through past campaigns, we've been able to donate nearly 20. At some point, I lost track. Some viewers also came up with the idea to donate their cars privately, independent of the campaign. They can all give themselves a pat on the back for that. They've saved more lives than most people on Earth. Well done. Nothing more needs to be said, in the spirit of humanity. By the way, after quite a long time, I finally had some medals made. The first ones will go to all channel members with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel here on the channel, so to everyone who has been a strong supporter for months, and who made the channel possible in the first place. A few regular viewers and bigger donors will of course also get a medal, as well as the people who show up in the comments every day. There are already a few names that come to mind, people I really see every day, with huge comments and also with very constructive comments. Of course, they shouldn't be left out either. You know what I mean? At some point in the near future, I'll provide a list for that. But one thing is certain, everyone with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel will definitely get one. And also my first major supporter back then, Roger T. Back then it was still through Patreon. Of course I haven't forgotten him. There's something for him too, including a few other things I wanted to send out. Everyone who was just mentioned, please contact me via Discord or email so I know where I can send them. For every 1,000 subscribers, I will also give away a certain number of them to existing subscribers. So subscribing is doubly worth it. But now let's take a look at the situation map. In the Wobchansk area, the situation has shifted further in favor of Ukraine, or rather, for the first time in favor of Ukraine. Because if we take a look at the whole area, you might remember, the Russians were actually only able to occupy this area here. So everything east of the river and a part in the north of the village. Then they managed to gain control over the north. Then they were able to attack over the bridges. And now they've more or less managed to capture almost the entire village, if not the whole place. Down here they had greater momentum and captured the neighboring villages. And right here, after a long time, the Ukrainians struck back. You could almost say that after the Ukrainians lost the city, they started to liberate the neighboring villages here again, which you can see very clearly here by the blue markings. At the same time, units of the Ukrainian armed forces from the area around Chehelin are also trying to attack the Russian outposts near Lyman. These are basically the locations here in this area, in the yellow marked area, which of course all points to a fairly coordinated approach. Pressure along the river line, combined with the attempt to isolate or cut off advanced Russian elements. The reclaimed area is reported to be around 15 square kilometers. That's not a major river breakthrough, but in wooded and riverine terrain, such territorial gains are not really trivial from an operational standpoint. The terrain plays a particularly central role, especially along the Seversky Donetsk. Lines of sight are quite limited, movements are mostly covered, and drone reconnaissance is made more difficult by vegetation, but not impossible. There's no need to even discuss that. So if Ukrainian forces manage to clear the Russian outposts near Lyman, the local front line would straighten and the pressure on Chansk itself would decrease. But the decisive factor will be whether this advance can be held and further expanded, or whether Russia will respond with reserves. Ass on thin ice is probably a very well-chosen term when you look at the situation at the front in the south. The Russian channel Rebar reports on a Ukrainian offensive in the area around Zaporizhzhia. Just as a reminder, the Ukrainians are currently taking advantage of the Starlink shutdown and have an advantage because the Russians have a communication gap that they can't fill at the moment. That means they're attacking the Russians in the places where they see the greatest chances for a counteroffensive. And all of this is happening at a time when the Russians don't have any alternative means of communication. So he's talking about a 20-kilometer deep offensive along the front. The situation is supposed to be very tough, and you know what that means. According to him, Ukrainian units are supposed to be using hundreds of drones to attack Russian positions. And Rebar is a very Kremlin-loyal channel. You shouldn't forget that. But let's take a look at the map, because he describes exactly what I predicted a few weeks ago. According to him, the Ukrainians are attacking precisely in this area, which I think became apparent about a week and a half ago. We've already seen attacks here recently along the blue pin. I said they're increasing the pressure here and will now try to cut off the Russians here as well. And that's how he describes it. There's also quite a large attack line here. On the one hand, attacks are being carried out here along the waterway to push the Russians back a bit, or rather to hold up the Russian units and concentrate on certain sections. On the one hand here, and on the other hand where the main attack is taking place, namely along the M18 road. And what is the goal? The goal is, of course, to isolate the towns along the waterway and this suburb from each other. At the same time, they want to drive a wedge in here, which will probably end up along the waterway. That would create a large encirclement of Russian soldiers in this area. It's clear that this is the choice because we have a large body of water here, a natural barrier. The north is already controlled by the Ukrainians anyway, and here, with a single attack with just one movement, you could close the pocket without having to risk a pincer movement, and you wouldn't have to deploy a lot of units for that. That means this would also be the most logical and resource-saving thing you could do here. That's why I pointed it out a week ago. On the other hand, we see further attacks, a bit further to the east. At this point, the Ukrainians are also continuing their attacks here. This is the area we've looked at several times before. There haven't been many geolocations recently, so we don't know which villages are fully controlled by the Ukrainians or which are fully controlled by the Russians. That's why I've still marked them all as Russian occupied, so in red. The area is quite orange, there's a lot of fighting going on here. But at the blue pins, we do have geolocations here. At the lowest blue pin, the one that's furthest south. We can also see from the Russian drone perspective where Ukrainian trenches are currently located, which they wanted to attack. That's at the blue pin, pretty far up front. That also matches many reports from the Russian side that the Ukrainians are largely attacking here, that they were able to liberate the border villages. I can imagine that, but I don't know what it looks like a bit further in depth. It will take a few more days before we have a clear picture of the situation. As I said, the Ukrainians are also sticking very closely to their orders, and since mid-2023, they no longer publish when they have achieved recent gains. That usually takes about half a week to a whole week until the map is more or less updated. On the night of the 20th, in February, Ukraine apparently hit a real jackpot, and it was from the same area. According to the Ukrainians, 3 Russian air defense missile systems were destroyed at once in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region. FP-2 attack drones with a total of 60 kilograms of warhead were used in the operation. In this case, FP-2 does not stand for first person, but for Firepoint, which is the company that also manufactures the Flamingo or ballistic missiles for Ukraine. These are not improvised drones, but actually heavy precision deployable systems with massive impact. The attacks are said to have occurred simultaneously. This is the result of quite precise reconnaissance, exact coordination, and a clear goal, namely to eliminate the Russian air defense in a sensitive area. The fact that the Zaporizhzhia region was chosen is, of course, no coincidence. We have just seen that the Ukrainians are fighting here, so why is this so critical? The Tor system was built precisely for this purpose, to intercept drones, cruise missiles, and other aerial threats at close range. It is a shield for troops, artillery, and logistics. If this shield is gone, everything underneath becomes vulnerable. Losing 3 systems in one night is not just material damage worth millions, it also means a noticeable gap in the local defense area that cannot be quickly replaced. And it's exactly these kinds of gaps that make further strikes deep inside possible, giving the Ukrainians the opportunity to keep advancing. Honestly, if you find this content helpful, please show your support. A like or a short comment helps the algorithm a lot. Some of them, and you've probably already seen this, can even hype up videos. Not everyone can do that, only a few can. And if you can do that, then definitely make use of it. Because honestly, that's not a problem. Reach determines whether daily analyses continue to exist or just get lost among all the other videos. The Ukrainian General Staff confirms coordinated strikes against several targets in their current direction of attack, so we're still in the area around Zaporizhzhia. Command posts, observation posts, ammunition and supply depots, as well as troop concentrations in this area were affected. Among the specifically mentioned targets are also a drone control point, a repair base, and logistical warehouses. Just like before, this was not a random choice, but a clearly recognizable pattern: command, maintenance, and supply. After the local air defense was attacked, a hit command post now disrupts coordination. And at a time when communication is already weak, a destroyed drone control point weakens reconnaissance and drone attacks. A damaged repair base increases downtime for vehicles and equipment, and every burning warehouse hits the supply chain. The Ukrainian strategy is clearly targeting operational depth, not just the soldiers in the kill zone or the drone control zone are being attacked, but especially the structure behind them. So whoever puts leadership, logistics, and technology under pressure at the same time forces the opponent to shift resources and fill gaps, or to resort to improvised solutions that don't always work out well. We have seen the Russians lose larger air defense systems, but they also have a good range of alternatives that I don't want to withhold from you. In new footage, a so-called Yoka interceptor drone can be seen, a self-guided system designed to specifically track and ram Ukrainian drones. The idea is quite simple. Instead of expensive missiles or large-caliber anti-aircraft weapons, they rely on comparatively inexpensive drones that are meant to fight other drones. This lowers costs and also increases responsiveness against small and fast targets, as well as reconnaissance and first-person view drones. At the same time, Russian sources report on tests of autonomous targeting systems, meaning gun turrets with independent target acquisition and tracking. Unfortunately, they haven't released a picture or video of it. According to them, such systems are supposed to be able to automatically detect and engage drones without the need for an operator to intervene. Technically, this involves sensor fusion from optics, thermal imaging, and possibly even radar. Are these solutions already ready for deployment in large numbers? I assume that, if anything, it will be a prototype series. Drone warfare is advancing on both fronts. Attack drones are growing stronger, and defense systems are becoming more specialized. A new level of combat is emerging: drone versus drone, automated system versus automated system, and a battlefield scenario that is becoming denser and faster as a result. And every new technology keeps shifting the balance further, at least until the other side finds a new countermeasure again. Late in the evening of the 19th, in February, over the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, so we're still in the same place, a Russian Su-34 fighter bomber was lost. Both Ukrainian and Russian sources report this. Around 10:30 p.m. local time, the aircraft is said to have crashed near Kamyanka. Shortly before that, the aircraft had dropped guided bombs on targets in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Before that, the aircraft had dropped bombs. Born in Dnipropetrovsk, suitable, wonderful. Shortly before that, the aircraft had steered into the regional forms with disabilities. Trigger. What is confirmed is that there is no official explanation for the cause of the crash. Possible technical defects, combat damage, or even a combination of both, as we have often seen before. In that airspace, Russian aircraft regularly operate within the range of Ukrainian air defense systems, but mostly from a great distance to reduce the risk of being shot down. The Su-34, which is called Fullback by NATO, is one of Russia's most important tactical fighter jets. It is primarily used for attacking ground targets, but it can also conduct limited air combat. With its high payload and range, it is often used to drop guided glide bombs, which are usually released from a safe distance. So it's unclear what the aircraft was doing here, if it possibly had glide bombs on board. But what we don't know, we only know there was a bomb drop. According to the open source database Urix, Russia has lost at least 4134 since the beginning of the war, but the actual number could be somewhat higher. A Russian military blogger is making serious accusations against the Avtomat Kalashnikova 12 assault rifle. It's actually intended to be the modern standard rifle of the Russian army. According to him, however, the barrel bends after intensive use when cooling down. In addition, the metal corroded unusually quickly. The trigger mechanism also fails frequently. What makes it particularly problematic, however, is that many weapons are already issued in poor condition, so soldiers have to procure spare parts themselves, often through private dealers and then at high prices. The Avtomat Kalashnikova 12 was introduced in 2018, if I remember correctly, as the successor to the Avtomat Kalashnikova 74M, and it was supposed to be simpler, more ergonomic, more precise, and better adapted to modern warfare. Instead, there has been criticism from the beginning about several design changes and a simplified version from 2023, so after the start of the invasion. People found that even the manufacturer had to make some adjustments. And that's very interesting because it touches a very sensitive point in technology. Because for decades, the Avtomat Kalashnikova system was considered the epitome of robustness and reliability at a comparatively low price. Whether these are just isolated cases or a broader problem is a bit difficult to verify from the outside. But the fact that this is coming from the pro-military camp itself makes the accusations all the more remarkable. Thank you to all subscribers, channel members, and the crew. Special thanks to Oberstadt. Renica is in charge here. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next Situation Report.